The night sky was perfectly clear when everything changed. Stars sparkled like diamonds against the black canvas above, and the forest was quiet except for the gentle sound of wind moving through the trees. Zara had been flying for 3 days straight. Her small silver ship cut through space silently, its advanced engines making no sound as she approached the blue planet her people called Earth. She was tired, hungry, and far from home. This was supposed to be a simple mission. Just take some pictures of the human cities, check their technology levels, and return to her home planet Zarian with a report. But something went wrong. A bright flash filled her cockpit as warning lights started blinking red all around her. The ship's computer spoke in her native language, telling her that the navigation system had failed. The steering controls stopped responding to her touch. Her heart started beating faster as she realized she was in serious trouble. The ship began falling toward Earth like a burning rock. Zara grabbed the emergency controls and tried everything she had learned in flight training. But nothing worked. The ground was getting closer and closer. She could see tall trees rushing toward her through the front window. Not like this, she whispered to herself, gripping the controls tightly. The ship crashed through the forest with a loud bang that echoed through the mountains. Trees broke and fell as the metal vessel slid across the ground before finally stopping. In a small clearing, smoke rose from the damaged engines, and sparks flew from broken wires inside the cockpit. Zara slowly opened her eyes. Her head hurt, and she could taste blood in her mouth. She looked down at her arm and saw a deep cut that was bleeding. Her whole body ached, but she was alive. The ship's emergency lights were still working, casting a red glow inside the cramped space. She tried to stand up but fell back down with a sharp pain in her leg. Something was definitely broken. Using the wall for support, she managed to reach for her communication device, hoping to call for help from her people. But when she pressed the buttons, nothing happened. The screen was cracked, and the device was completely dead. Fear started to fill her chest. She was alone, hurt, and trapped on a strange planet millions of miles from home. Her people had strict rules about contact with humans. If the Earth people found her, she didn't know what they would do. Her teachers had told her stories about how humans treated things they didn't understand. They might lock her up, study her, or worse, miles away. David was finishing his evening patrol of the national park. He had been a park ranger for 8 years and loved his job, especially the quiet night shifts when he could look at the stars. He carried a powerful flashlight, a first aid kit, and a radio that connected him to the ranger station. David had always been fascinated by space. As a child, he would lie on his back in the grass for hours, wondering if there was life on other planets. He owned 3 different telescopes and could name every constellation in the sky. His small cabin was filled with astronomy books and star charts. That night felt different somehow. He had seen what looked like a shooting star earlier, but it seemed to bright and moved strangely. Shooting stars usually disappeared quickly, but this one had stayed visible for almost 10 seconds before vanishing behind the mountains. As he walked along the forest trail, David noticed something odd. There was a strange smell in the air, like burning metal. Then he heard it, a soft humming sound that didn't belong in the natural quiet of the forest. His training told him to be careful, but his curiosity was stronger than his caution. Following the sound and smell, David made his way through the thick trees. Branches caught on his uniform and scratched his hands, but he kept moving toward whatever was making that noise. After walking for about 20 minutes, he saw a strange orange glow through the trees ahead. When he reached the clearing, David stopped and stared in complete amazement. In front of him was something that looked like it came from a science fiction movie. A sleek silver craft, about the size of a small car, sat smoking among the broken trees. Its surface was smooth and seemed to shimmer in his flashlight beam. There were no visible seams or bolts, as if the entire ship had been formed from one piece of metal. David's mind raced as he tried to understand what he was seeing. This definitely wasn't any kind of aircraft he knew about. The military didn't have anything that looked like this, neither did any country on Earth, as far as he knew. Then he saw movement inside the ship through what looked like a transparent section. His heart started pounding as he realized there was someone inside, and they appeared to be hurt. All his training as a park ranger kicked in. Someone needed help, and that was all that mattered. David carefully approached the ship, calling out gently so he wouldn't scare whoever was inside. "Hello, are you okay in there? I'm here to help." Inside the ship, Zara heard the voice and froze. A human had found her. This was exactly what she had been taught to avoid her entire life. She tried to make herself smaller in the pilot's seat, hoping the human would go away. But David didn't leave. He could see that someone inside was hurt and needed medical attention. Very slowly, he moved closer to the ship, speaking in a calm, gentle voice the way he would talk to a scared animal. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm a park ranger. I have medical supplies that might help." Zara understood his words. Her people had been studying Earth languages for many years, and she spoke English perfectly. But understanding him and trusting him were two very different things. Through the transparent section, she could see the human clearly now. He was tall with kind eyes and appeared to be alone. He wasn't carrying any weapons that she could see, just a bright light and what looked like a bag of some kind. The pain in her arm was getting worse, and she was starting to feel dizzy from losing blood. She knew she needed help, but everything she had been taught told her that humans were dangerous and unpredictable. David could see the person inside was definitely hurt and getting weaker. He made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. Setting down his flashlight and radio, he raised both hands to show he wasn't armed. "Please let me help you. I can see you're bleeding. I have bandages and medicine in my first aid kit." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Zara looked into David's eyes through the ship's window and saw something she hadn't expected. Genuine concern and kindness against all her training and instincts. She slowly reached toward the ship's door controls. The door opened with a soft hiss, and David got his first look at someone from another world. Despite her injuries, Zara was clearly not human. Her skin had a slight blue tint. Her eyes were larger than normal, and her hair seemed to move on its own like it was floating in water. But David didn't run or scream or reach for his radio. Instead, he smiled gently and said, "Hi there. My name is David. What's yours?" And that was how the beings from different worlds met for the first time, in a forest clearing under the stars, with nothing but kindness and the universal need to help someone in pain. The next morning came too quickly for both of them. David had spent most of the night thinking about what had happened in the forest. He kept replaying the moment when Zara's ship door had opened, wondering if he had dreamed the whole thing. But the scratches on his hands from walking through the trees were real enough, and so was the small piece of strange metal he had found near the crash site. Zara had barely slept at all. Every sound in the forest made her jump, thinking that more humans were coming to find her. She had managed to patch up her arm with some kind of healing gel from her ship's emergency kit, but her legs still hurt when she tried to walk. The ship's main computer was completely dead, and most of her repair tools were damaged in the crash. She needed help, but accepting help from a human went against everything she had been taught. Since childhood, her people, the Zirians, had learned, through bitter experience, not to trust other species too quickly. Their home planet had been invaded twice by beings who had seemed friendly at first. The scars from those wars still shaped how her people viewed the universe. But David had been different from what she expected. He could have easily hurt her when she was weak and trapped, but instead he had cleaned her wounds and given her food and water. He had even left his jacket with her when he noticed she was cold. Still, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that he must want something in return. Around noon, she heard footsteps approaching through the forest. Her heart started racing until she recognized David's voice calling out softly, "Zara, it's David. I brought you some things that might help." She watched from behind a fallen tree as he approached the clearing. He was carrying a large backpack and moving slowly, probably trying not to scare her. When he reached the crash site, he looked around until he spotted her hiding place. "Good morning," he said with that same gentle smile from the night before. "How are you feeling?" "Better," she replied, though she stayed hidden behind the tree. "Why did you come back?" David set down his backpack and sat on a nearby rock, keeping some distance between them. I thought you might need these. He started, pulling things out of the bag, more medical supplies, bottles of water, some fruit, and what looked like electronic tools. I work with radio equipment sometimes, he explained. Noticing her curious look at the tools, I thought maybe I could help you fix your communication device. Zara was surprised. Most humans she had studied seemed to only think about themselves. But David kept offering to help her with nothing to gain. Why would you do that? She asked. Because you're stuck here and scared, and I know what that feels like, David said. Simply, when I was young, my family moved around a lot because of my father's job. I was always the new kid who didn't fit in anywhere. I remember how lonely that felt. Something in his voice made Zara step out from behind the tree. She was still limping, but she managed to walk closer to where he was sitting. Your people move between different places on this planet. All the time, David nodded. Humans are always moving, always looking for better opportunities or new experiences. Don't your people do the same? We travel between stars, Zara said, sitting down on another rock several feet away from him. But we usually travel alone. Family groups stay together on the home world. That must be lonely, David said, and Zara was surprised by how well he understood. Over the next few hours, David showed her how his electronic tools worked. They were primitive compared to Zirian technology, but some of the basic principles were the same. While they worked, they talked about their different worlds. Zara learned that Earth had thousands of different languages, cultures, and ways of life all on one planet. This amazed her, since Zirian had developed one unified culture centuries ago. David learned that there were hundreds of inhabited planets in Zara's part of the galaxy, each with its own unique species and customs. How many planets have you visited? David asked as he carefully examined her damaged communication device. 17, Zara replied. Most of them were just quick stops to gather information. I've never stayed anywhere long enough to really get to know the people. What's your favorite planet you've seen? Zara thought for a moment. There's a world called Kepler 440 to be where everything glows softly at night. The plants, the water, even the rocks. It's beautiful, but there's no intelligent life there. Just me, flying over empty oceans that sparkle like your Earth stars. Sounds amazing, but lonely. David said, I've never been anywhere except Earth, but I've spent a lot of time alone too. That's why I became a park ranger. I like the quiet. But sometimes, he trailed off. Sometimes you want someone to share it with, Zara finished. Exactly. As the afternoon wore on, David managed to get Zara's communication device partially working. The screen flickered on and off, and they could hear static that might have been voices from space. But it wasn't strong enough to send a clear message. I need better tools and more time, David said. The electronics in this thing are way beyond anything I've seen. But the basic damage looks fixable. Zara wanted to trust him, but doubt still filled her mind. What if you're lying? What if you're just trying to learn about our technology so you can use it against us? David looked hurt by her words, but he tried to understand. I guess I'd be suspicious too if I crashed on an alien planet. Look, I can't prove my intentions to you with words, but I can show you something that might help. He pulled out a small device that Zara recognized as a primitive telescope. This is how I spend most of my free time, he said, looking up at the stars and wondering what's out there. I've dreamed about meeting someone from another planet my whole life, but I never imagined they'd be hurt and scared when it happened. You study the stars? Every clear night, I have bigger telescopes at my cabin, and I've been tracking what I thought were satellites, but now realize might have been ships like yours. David adjusted some settings on the small telescope and handed it to her. Here, look at that bright star over there. Zara looked through the telescope and saw a familiar point of light that she knew was her home sun. That's where I come from, she whispered, feeling a sharp pain of homesickness. I know, David said softly. I've been watching that system for years, wondering if anyone was looking back, for the first time since the crash. Zara felt tears in her eyes. This human understood something that even her own people sometimes Forgot the deep loneliness of looking up at an endless sky and wondering if you're alone in the universe. My people think humans are dangerous, she said quietly, still looking through the telescope. Some of us probably are, David admitted, but some of us just want to understand and help. How can I prove to you which kind I am? Zara lowered the telescope and looked at him directly. His eyes were honest and patient. He hadn't tried to rush her or pressure her into trusting him, even now. When she was questioning his motives, he wasn't getting angry or defensive. I don't know, she said. Truthfully, I've never been in this situation before. Neither have I, David said with a small laugh. I guess we'll have to figure it out together. As the sun started to set, David packed up his tools and prepared to leave. I'll come back tomorrow with better equipment, he promised, and maybe some warmer clothes. It gets cold out here at night, David. Zara called as he started to walk away. He turned back to her. Thank you for everything. He smiled. See you tomorrow, Zara, as she watched him disappear into the forest. Zara felt something she hadn't expected. She was already looking forward to seeing him again. Maybe, just maybe, not all humans were as dangerous as her people believed. The third day started with the sound David had been dreading, helicopters in the distance. He was walking toward the crash site with a backpack full of better tools when he heard the deep thumping of rotor blades echoing through the mountains. His blood ran cold as he realized what this meant. Someone had reported the strange lights from 2 nights ago. David quickly pulled out his radio and switched to the emergency channel. The voices he heard confirmed his worst fears. A search and rescue team was being organized to look for what local residents had described as a plane crash with unusual explosions. The helicopters would be combing the entire forest within hours. His mind raced as he thought about Zara, probably still hiding near her damaged ship. She had finally started to trust him a little bit, but now everything was about to change. If the search teams found her, they would take her away to some government facility where scientists would study her like a lab specimen. She would never see her home again. David made the hardest decision of his life. Instead of continuing toward Zara, he turned around and headed back toward the main trail. He had to mislead the search teams somehow, even though it meant lying to his fellow rangers and possibly ending his career. Meanwhile, Zara heard the helicopters too and knew exactly what they meant. Her people had been watching Earth for decades, and they knew how humans reacted to things they didn't understand. They would capture her, study her technology, and probably try to force her to reveal the location of her homeworld. She crawled deeper into the thick forest, dragging her damaged communication device with her. Her legs still hurt, but fear gave her the strength to move. She found a dense cluster of bushes where she could hide and still see her ship in the clearing. From her hiding spot, she watched as the helicopters circled overhead, their loud noise scaring away all the forest animals. She could see uniformed humans hanging out of the aircraft, pointing at the ground and talking into their own communication devices. One helicopter landed in the clearing next to her ship, and several people in military uniforms jumped out. They approached the alien craft carefully, weapons ready, clearly expecting to find something dangerous. When they realized the ship was empty, they began examining it and taking photographs. Zara's heart sank as she watched strangers touching her ship and pointing their strange devices at it. These humans looked nothing like David. Their faces were hard and suspicious, and they moved like hunters tracking prey. This was exactly what her people had warned her about. Then she heard a familiar voice calling out from the forest. Over here, I found something. David emerged from the trees on the opposite side of the clearing, waving his arms to get the attention of the military team. Zara was confused. Why was he bringing more humans to her crash site? I'm Ranger David Chen, he called out as he approached the soldiers. I've been tracking this thing since yesterday. Zara's confusion turned to shock as she listened to what David said next. The crash site continues about half a mile that way, David said, pointing away from where Zara was actually hiding. I found pieces of wreckage scattered all through that valley. Whatever this thing was, it broke apart when it hit the trees. The military leader, a stern woman with short gray hair, looked skeptical. You were here yesterday. Why didn't you report it immediately? I tried. David lied smoothly. But my radio was damaged in a fall. I had to hike back to the ranger station to make the report. And then I came back this morning to mark the debris. Feel for you. One of the soldiers had been examining Zara's ship closely. Sir, this doesn't look like any aircraft I've ever seen. The metal composition is completely unknown, and there are no visible engine parts or fuel systems. Probably some kind of experimental military drone, the leader said dismissively. Let's follow the ranger to see the rest of the wreckage. David began walking toward the forest, leading the entire team away from Zara's hiding spot. As they disappeared into the trees, Zara realized what he had done. He had lied to his own people to protect her. He was risking his job, maybe even his freedom, to keep her safe for the next 3 hours. David led the search team on a wild chase through the forest. He showed them pieces of normal aircraft wreckage that he claimed were from the alien ship, parts he had secretly placed there from old plane crashes. He remembered from previous Ranger reports. He made up detailed stories about tracking the debris and even drew fake maps showing where he thought the main part of the craft had landed. The soldiers grew frustrated as they found nothing but ordinary metal scraps and broken tree branches. Finally, the team leader decided they had wasted enough time. This is probably just space junk that burned up in the atmosphere, she announced. Clean up that strange object in the clearing, and we'll let the science boys figure out what it is. As the team prepared to take Zara's ship, David felt a moment of panic. Without her ship, Zara would be truly stranded on Earth. But he couldn't stop them without revealing that he knew more than he was telling. The helicopters lifted off with Zara's ship hanging beneath them on thick cables, heading towards some distant military base. The forest fell quiet again, leaving David alone with the weight of what he had just done. He waited until he was sure the helicopters were completely gone, before making his way to where he thought Zara might be hiding. He found her sitting against a tree, tears streaming down her face as she watched her only way home disappear into the distance. They took my ship, she whispered when she saw him approaching. I know, David said quietly, sitting down beside her. I'm sorry. I tried to lead them away, but I couldn't stop them from taking it without making them suspicious. Zara looked at him with wide eyes. You led them away. You lied to your own people. Yes. Why? The question came out as barely a whisper. David was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully, because you're not just some alien specimen to be studied. You're a person with thoughts and feelings and a family somewhere who's probably worried about you. You deserve better than being locked up in some government lab. But now you could get in trouble for helping me. Probably, David admitted. But it was the right thing to do. Zara stared at him, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. This human had sacrificed his own safety to protect someone he barely knew. He had given up her ship to keep her free, even though it meant she might never be able to go home. I don't understand, she said. Why would you do this for me? What do you gain? Nothing, David said simply. That's not why you help people. But your people, they'll be angry when they find out you lied. Maybe. But I can live with their anger. I couldn't live with knowing I let them take you away. For the first time since meeting David, Zara began to truly believe that his kindness was real. No one would risk so much for someone they planned to betray. The stories her people told about humans being selfish and cruel didn't match the man sitting beside her, who had just given up everything to keep her safe. Your ship, she said suddenly, remembering something important. Do you know where they took it? Probably to a military research facility about 200 miles from here. Why? Because without it, I can't contact my people or repair my communication device. I'm trapped here. David felt his heart sink as he realized the full impact of what the military had done. By taking Zara's ship, they had essentially stranded her on Earth forever. She would never see her home planet again, never reunite with her family. I'm so sorry, he said. I should have found a way to stop them. No, Zara said firmly. You saved my life today. If they had found me with the ship, they would have taken both of us. At least this way, I'm still free. But you're stuck here. Zara was quiet for a moment, looking up at the sky where her ship had disappeared. Maybe that's not entirely bad. She said softly, "What do you mean? I've spent my whole life traveling, alone between empty planets and distant stars. I never had a friend before." She looked at David with something that might have been hope in her eyes. Maybe being stuck in one place with one friend is better than being alone in space. David felt something warm spread through his chest. Despite everything that had gone wrong, despite losing her ship and being stranded millions of miles from home, Zara was choosing to see the positive side of their situation. "So what do we do now?" he asked. "Now we figure out how to live on your planet," Zara said with a small smile. "Together, as the sun set behind the mountains." David realized that helping Zara hadn't just changed her life, it had changed his too. For the first time in years, he wasn't alone anymore either. 3 weeks had passed since the military took Zara's ship, and everything had changed between them. What started as a desperate situation had slowly transformed into something neither of them had expected, a genuine friendship that was growing. Deeper each day, David had been taking enormous risks to help Zara survive. Every morning before his ranger shift, he would hike to their secret meeting spot deep in the forest, bringing food, clean water, and supplies. Every evening after work, he would return to spend time with her, often staying until well past midnight. His supervisor had started asking questions about why David seemed so tired lately, and why he was requesting to patrol the most remote sections of the forest. David had to come up with creative excuses, claiming he was working on a personal research project about local wildlife patterns. For Zara, these weeks had been the strangest and most interesting of her life. She had always been a scout, moving from planet to planet, never staying anywhere long enough to form real connections. But now, forced to remain in one place, she was discovering what it meant to have someone who cared about her well-being. David had brought her books about Earth, and she spent her days reading about human history, culture, and science. She was amazed by how much humans had accomplished in such a short time. Her people had taken thousands of years to develop space travel, but humans had gone from riding horses to flying aircraft in less than a century. "Your species learns incredibly fast," she told David one evening as they sat by a small fire he had built. "Most races in the galaxy take much longer to develop technology." "Maybe we're just impatient," David laughed. "We want to see everything and do everything in one lifetime." "That's not a bad thing," Zara said thoughtfully. "My people live much longer than humans, but we're very cautious. Sometimes it takes us decades to make decisions that you would make in days." David had been teaching her about Earth's constellations and showing her how to use his telescopes. In return, Zara told him stories about the planets she had visited and the amazing things she had seen in space. She described worlds where the oceans were made of liquid crystal, planets where the trees grew upside down from floating islands, and star systems where multiple suns created rainbows. That lasted for months. "I wish I could show you all of those places," Zara said wistfully as they looked up at the stars together. "Maybe someday you can." David replied, "Once we figure out how to get you home." But as the days passed, both of them began to realize that getting Zara home wasn't their only concern anymore. They had started to care about each other in ways that made the idea of separation painful to think about. David found himself looking forward to their meetings more than anything else in his life. Zara was unlike anyone he had ever met, not just because she was from another planet, but because of her curious mind, her gentle humor, and her unique way of seeing the world. She asked questions about things he had never thought about and shared insights that changed how he understood his own planet. Zara was experiencing emotions she had never felt before. In her culture, relationships were practical arrangements focused on duty and survival. But what she felt for David was something entirely different, a warmth that had nothing to do with practical concerns, and everything to do with simply enjoying his company. One evening, as storm clouds gathered overhead, David made a decision that would change everything between them. "Zara," he said quietly as they packed up their stargazing equipment, "I want to ask you something, but you have to promise to say no." If you're not comfortable with it, she looked at him curiously. What is it? There's a big storm coming tonight, and it's going to be cold and wet out here. I was wondering. He paused, seeming nervous. Would you like to come to my cabin? Just until the storm passes, you'd be warm and dry. And we could work on trying to rebuild your communication device with better tools. Zara's heart started beating faster. Going to David's home would be a huge step of trust in her culture. Entering someone's private dwelling was a sign of complete faith in their intentions. If David wanted to harm her or turn her over to the authorities, his cabin would be the perfect place to do it. But as she looked at his honest face and remembered everything he had done to protect her, Zara realized that her feelings had already made the decision for her. Yes, she said softly, I would like that. David's cabin was small but cozy, tucked away in a remote part of the forest where no other humans ever came. It was filled with books about astronomy, star charts covering the walls, and 3 different telescopes positioned near the windows. Zara was fascinated by his collection of space photographs and the detailed notes he had made about planetary movements. You really do love the stars, she said, examining a chart that showed the movement of her home constellation. I always have, David replied, starting a fire in the stone fireplace. When I was a kid, I used to pretend I was an astronaut, exploring distant galaxies. I never imagined I'd actually meet someone who had done that. And I never imagined I'd meet a human who understood what it felt like to look at space and feel homesick for places you've never been, Zara said. That night, as rain pounded against the cabin windows and wind howled through the trees, David and Zara talked more openly than they ever had before. David told her about growing up feeling different from other kids, about choosing a career that let him spend time alone in nature, because he found most human social situations overwhelming. I always felt like I was watching other people's lives from the outside, he admitted, like I was an alien studying human behavior, but never really belonging. I know exactly what you mean, Zara said. That's how I felt on every planet I visited. Always observing, never participating. But you don't feel that way now? David asked. Zara looked around the warm cabin, at the fire crackling in the fireplace, at David's kind face in the golden light. No, she said quietly, for the first time in my life, I feel like I belong somewhere. They spent the next several hours working together on Zara's communication device, combining David's practical engineering skills with Zara's advanced technological knowledge. They made more progress in one evening than they had in weeks of outdoor attempts. I think we're actually close to getting this working, David said excitedly as they managed to get a clear signal from space. But instead of sharing his excitement, Zara suddenly looked sad. David, what happens when we do get it working? When I can contact my people? The question hung in the air between them. They both knew that once Zara could communicate with her home planet, everything would change. Her people would come to rescue her, and she would have to leave Earth forever. I don't know, David said honestly. I guess we'll figure that out when it happens. What if? Zara started, then stopped herself. What if what? What if I don't want to leave? She whispered. David felt his heart skip a beat. What do you mean? I mean, what if I found something here that I never had before? What if going home means giving up the best thing that's ever happened to me? David moved closer to her, speaking softly. Zara, you can't give up your whole world for someone you've only known for a few weeks, can I? She asked. You gave up your career and risked your freedom for someone you'd only known for a few days. That's different. How? David struggled to find an answer that made sense. The truth was, he had been asking himself the same questions. The thought of Zara leaving filled him with a sadness he had never experienced before. But he also knew that she had a life and family among them, stars that she couldn't simply abandon. Your people will be worried about you, he said finally. They deserve to know you're safe. You're right, Zara sighed. But that doesn't make this any easier. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the cabin, David and Zara had found something that neither of them wanted to let go of. They had found each other, and now they had to figure out what that meant for both of their futures. As they sat together watching the fire burn lower, Both of them knew that their relationship had crossed into territory that would make every future decision more complicated. They were no longer just a human and an alien who had met by accident. They had become something much more precious and much more fragile to lonely souls who had found in each other the connection they had been searching for their entire lives. 2 months had passed since that stormy night in David's cabin, and their communication device was finally working perfectly. The small device hummed softly on David's kitchen table, its alien symbols glowing blue in the morning light. After weeks of careful work, they had successfully contacted Zara's home planet. The response from Zirian had been immediate and intense. Zara's people had been searching for her ever since her ship failed to return from its mission. They were relieved to learn she was alive and safe, but shocked to discover where she was and who had been helping her. They want to send a rescue ship, Zara had told David after her first conversation with the Zirian Council. They can be here in 6 Earth weeks. That's good news, David had replied, though his voice didn't sound happy at all. Yes, Zara had agreed quietly. Good news. But neither of them felt good about it. Over the past 2 months, they had become inseparable. David had taken extended leave from his ranger job, claiming he needed time to recover from a back injury. In reality, he spent every day with Zara, showing her more of Earth's wonders and learning about the vast galaxy beyond his planet. They had hiked to hidden waterfalls where Zara marveled at the way sunlight created rainbows in the mist. They had visited ancient caves where David showed her Native American paintings that were thousands of years old. At night, they would lie on blankets under the stars while Zara pointed out her home constellation and told David stories about the planets there. That bright star there, she would say, that's where I was born. And that cluster of smaller stars? Those are the trading worlds where different species come together to share knowledge and resources. It sounds amazing, David would reply, though he couldn't hide the sadness in his voice. Every story Zara told reminded him of the incredible life she was giving up to stay hidden on Earth. During those 2 months, they had both changed in ways they never expected. David had become more confident and outgoing, no longer content to spend all his time alone. Zara had become more open with her emotions, learning to express feelings that her logical, duty-focused culture had never encouraged. But now, with rescue on the way, they had to face the reality they had been avoiding. Soon, Zara would have to choose between the life she had always known and the new life she had discovered on Earth. The choice became even more complicated when Zara received a second message from home. This time, it wasn't just about rescuing her. The Zirian Council had made a decision that would change everything. David, Zara said one evening as they sat by the fire in his cabin, I need to tell you something important. My people want to meet you, meet me. David looked confused. Why? Because of what I told them about you. About how you protected me and helped me survive. About how humans might not be as dangerous as we always believed. Zara explained that her reports about David's kindness had started a huge debate on Zirian. For generations, her people had avoided contact with other species because of past betrayals and wars. But Zara's experiences with David were making some of them reconsider that policy. There's a group of council members who think it might be time to try building peaceful relationships with other worlds, she said. They want to start with Earth, and they want you to be part of the first contact process. David's mind raced as he tried to understand what this meant. You're talking about official contact between our planets? Yes, trade, cultural exchange, shared scientific research. Everything my people have avoided for centuries, and they want me to help with this? They want you to be Earth's first ambassador to alien civilizations. You would come with me too. Zirian, meet with our leaders, and help create agreements between our worlds. David felt dizzy as the implications hit him. Zara, that would mean leaving Earth forever. I know, she said softly. Just like staying here would mean I'd never see my home again. They sat in silence for a long time, both of them struggling with the impossible choice they were facing. David would have to give up everything he had ever known, his planet, his job, his entire way of life, to be with Zara. But if he didn't, they would be separated by millions of miles and might never see each other again. What do you want to do? David asked finally. I want to be with you, Zara said without hesitation. I don't care if it's on Earth, on Zirion, or floating in space somewhere. These past few months have been the happiest of my life. Mine too, David admitted. But this isn't just about us anymore. If we do this wrong, it could affect the relationship between our entire planets. Or if we do it right, it could be the beginning of something amazing. Over the next few weeks, they talked through every possible option. David could come with Zara to Zirion and help establish diplomatic relations. But he would essentially be an alien himself on her world. Zara could stay on Earth and help David make contact with human governments. But she would be giving up her family and her entire civilization. The decision became even more complex when Zara's rescue ship arrived. Ahead of schedule, it landed in the same forest clearing where Zara had first crashed. But this time there was no accident and no fear. The ship was sleek and beautiful, with 3 Zirion crew members who had come specifically to meet the human, who had changed their colleagues' perspective on interspecies cooperation. Captain Ilix, the mission leader, was older than Zara with silver hair and kind eyes that reminded David of his grandmother. She spoke English with a slight accent but was perfectly understandable. So you are the human who saved our scout, she said. Studying David carefully, Zara has told us much about your kindness and wisdom. I just did what anyone should do for someone who needed help. David replied. That is exactly what she said you would say. Captain Ilix smiled. Humble and focused on others rather than yourself. These are rare qualities in any species. The captain explained that the Zirion Council was prepared to offer David something unprecedented, the chance to become the first human ambassador to their civilization. He would live on Zirion, learn their ways, and help build bridges between their worlds in return. Zara would eventually return to Earth as Zirion's first ambassador to humanity. You would both be pioneers, Captain Ilix said, the first of your kinds to live among another species and create lasting peace between worlds. But we'd be apart 4 years while we each learned about the other civilization. Zara said sadly. Perhaps, the captain admitted. Or perhaps you would find ways to visit each other and work together on joint projects. The future is unwritten. That night, David and Zara walked to their favorite spot overlooking the valley, where they had spent so many evenings stargazing. Together, the Zirion ship glowed softly in the distance, ready to take them toward whatever future they chose. Are you scared? Zara asked as they lay on their backs looking up at the stars. Terrified, David admitted, I've never been more than a few hundred miles from where I was born. Now I'm thinking about traveling to another star system. I'm scared too, Zara said. But not of the travel or the unknown planets. I'm scared of losing what we have. We won't lose it, David said firmly. No matter what happens, no matter how far apart we might be, what we've found together isn't going anywhere. Promise? I promise. The next morning, David made his decision. He would go with Zara to Zirion, not just as her companion, but as Earth's first ambassador to the stars. It would mean leaving behind everything familiar, but it would also mean being part of something larger than himself. The beginning of a new age of cooperation between worlds. Captain Ilix was pleased with the decision. Your courage honors both of our species, she told David. You are taking a step that will be remembered for generations. As they prepared to board the Zirion ship, David took one last look at the forest where he had spent his entire adult life. He thought about the scared, lonely ranger who had stumbled onto a crash site 2.5 months ago, never imagining that helping one injured alien would lead to this moment. Ready? Zara asked. Taking his hand. No. David laughed. But let's do it anyway. The ship lifted off smoothly, rising above the trees and into the blue sky. As Earth grew smaller below them, David felt a mixture of excitement and homesickness that he knew would stay with him for a long time. But he also felt something else, a sense of purpose he had never experienced before. He and Zara weren't just two individuals who had fallen in love across the vastness of space. They were the beginning of a bridge between worlds. proof that understanding and friendship could overcome any distance. 6 months later, David sent his first official report back to Earth. From the Xerian homeworld, it began with these words: "To the people of Earth, the universe is vast and full of wonders. But the most amazing discovery I've made is that kindness and friendship are truly universal languages. The adventure is just beginning, and in a small cabin on Earth that now serves as humanity's first embassy to alien civilizations." Zara smiled as she read David's message and began planning her own journey back to the blue planet where she had learned what it meant to truly belong somewhere.